I'm Michael Fox, and this is a Prospector podcast. And we are on location at the Better in Our Backyard Mining Expo in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I have sitting across from me a good friend and energy expert, Scott Melbye, CEO. No, sorry, it's the
Executive VP of UEC.
Thank you.
CEO of Uranium Royalty.
Yeah, well, I always like to give you a bit of a
bump
with pay there, but Amir probably's not having any of it. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Yep.
Just before we get into this too far, let's tell people what UEC is all about, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, listen, Uranium Energy Corp. These are incredibly exciting times for the company. If you followed our fiscal year-end results, which came out last couple of weeks, we have commenced production finally at Christensen Ranch and Irigaray. After all those years of low uranium prices and the industry kind of treading water, we're now in a situation now where we need more mine production. We need a lot of it, and we need it in a hurry. And so to be in production finally at very attractive production costs. I think on our first initial production, we were coming in under $40 a pound, all in sustaining cost at that level, bodes very well as we now get into the current quarter and next couple quarters where we're into fresh new well fields at ramped up production rates. So very good to be back in production and also starting up new operations at Burke Hollow in November, December. So we've been working actively over the last 18 months, building out the well fields and the satellites down in South Texas. And then, of course, we've also got Sweetwater, which is in the Great Divide Basin of Wyoming, which we were fortunate to be placed on the Fast 41 list in the Trump administration for kind of fast track permitting to get that into production. So 3 production centers, 12 million pounds licensed capacity, 300 million pounds of resources within 50 to 100 miles of those 3 production centers. So incredibly exciting times. We've really transitioned now from development company to operating producer.
Now, that's congratulations to the company. It's been a long time coming. You kept building resources, but the price of uranium stayed stagnant for so long after Fukushima that, you know, it was well below that $40 a pound that you were talking about.
Yep.
So, you know, there's no sense in mining it if you can't make money at it. And but now the world has changed and it's starting to come back into light, and you kind of went, you know, from 0 to 60, forget 0 to 60, you went 0 to like 120 in a very short period of time with these 3 new productions. So the first one, how many pounds are you able to put through in the first one that's gone into production?
Yeah, so the production that we announced, it really was the cutoff at the end of July. We indicated 130,000 pounds dried and precipitated and drummed. That's just kind of an arbitrary cutoff because we were just in the ramp up phase. Over the course of last year, we were constructing larger well fields now, where I think in the next 4 months you're going to see a more steady state production, perhaps approaching closer to 1 million pounds over 12 months. So yeah, it's good to finally be up and running and have an incredible amount of flexibility. As it sits today, we're targeting anywhere from 5 to 7 million pounds of production by the end of the decade, by 2030, annual production. But we have licensed capacity to 12. So if we had a call from the Trump administration to support the strategic uranium reserve, or we had a strategic partner needing uranium and wanting an offtake, we can do more. And we can also do less. We can dial back if uranium prices aren't increasing as fast as we'd like them to. We have a lot more flexibility than in a conventional mining operation where you're kind of stuck on a mine plan.
Yeah, that's the nice thing about the uranium market. You can kind of ebb and flow it to some degree. It's at some point there's a price that doesn't make sense for anybody,
Yeah.
but we're nowhere near that any longer. So when we talk about the demand in in North America, what is the demand for uranium currently, and how much of that demand now is your new facilities going to be able to provide?
Yeah, so U.S. utilities just reported in the DOE EIA numbers that they procured over 50 million pounds for their reactors last year. That would be actual reactor operations and any sort of inventory build. The requirements for reactors are in that 45 to 50 million pound range. So our 12 million pounds of capacity is a significant amount of U.S. demand globally, and this is truly a global market. We just left the World Nuclear Association meetings in London, where the supply and demand report that comes out every 2 years from that association indicated that we're now on track to double nuclear generation by 2045. Of course, that means a doubling of uranium conversion and enrichment. And we're not seeing that, which is very bullish for the investment thesis, in that we've got to build a lot of mines because the inventories that sustained us in this supply deficit that we've been in are largely gone now. The marginal pound that needs to meet market demand needs to come from a produced pound. And as you know, that's dependent on cost of production, permitting timelines, everything that goes into a mined pound of uranium. So, and that's against the World Nuclear Association's aspirational goals to triple nuclear power by 2050 and President Trump's goal in the United States to quadruple nuclear power. And it comes back to that AI and power demand. The nuclear energy story was really an emerging market story for many, many years. It was India, China, countries just needing to get a fraction of the standard of living that we enjoy in the West by having energy, abundant energy. Well, now that energy load growth demand has come to the developed markets in the developed world, and it's not just AI and data centers, it's electrification of homes and businesses, transportation, everything else, but the data center demand really kicks it, as you said, into an exponential growth phase. And in an energy dominance world of President Trump's administration, that means we're going to rely heavily on natural gas, nuclear, and coal. It's not one or the other or two out of three. It's all three need to fire on all cylinders. So for us, it means licensing, permitting new reactors at a fraction of the time they've been licensed in the past. It means getting the financing, whether it's public-private partnerships with the U.S. government, or just bringing in some of these hyperscalers who need these nuclear power plants to achieve their AI objectives, and through these data centers. So extremely robust market. I mean, listen, we wouldn't be ramping up production solely on the positive policy that we're seeing right now. That is very helpful. It's positive policy, and it is strong market conditions. Uranium is now trading at $81 a pound. And we think the fundamentals, would have prices next year over $100 a pound, which at our all-in cost of 40 or slightly below $40, that's really good margins. And so we've prepared the operations to be ready for this moment, and now it's time to execute.
When we've spoken in the past, one of the bottlenecks always seems to be the processing. You can mine the ore, which you've got mine production coming now, but the bottleneck was in the processing. Your company's plan is to process your own ore at some point. How close are you to that?
Yeah, not only our own ore, but others as well. Uranium Energy Corp announced that we're going to proceed with a 10,000 metric ton uranium refining and conversion facility in the United States. That would be the largest facility in the U.S. It would be the most modern, built globally. Why are we doing this? We're seeing good things happening on uranium. We're seeing good things happening on the enrichment phase, where there's been strong policy support, and a number of companies like Urenco, General Matter, GLE, Centrus, all looking to expand enrichment capacity. But the missing link has been UF6 conversion. And this is the smallest component of the fuel cycle, but none of it works without it. So for us to step up and become a vertically integrated supplier of not only uranium from the United States, but uranium, which has been refined and converted to UF6 in the United States, we're really positioning to be a national champion on the front end of the fuel cycle. And that seems to be very appealing to the Trump administration. And we're back in DC quite a bit these days to see what sort of support, what does it look like for, is it loan guarantees? Is it an MP materials type equity investment? Is it offtakes? Is it contributing to the strategic uranium reserve, or some combination of all of that? But we're very eager to see what that government support looks like. We're also in a siting phase where we're looking at several different states, sites within several states, to locate this based on road, rail, ports, workforce, but also incentives that are being offered to us to site in states that want to have the whole fuel cycle in their jurisdiction. We're also had an overwhelming inbound of strategic partners that want to be part of this, either they're in the fuel cycle and there's a synergy, or strategic consumers wanting to see this plant built. So we're really flattered. And then, of course, the fourth step will be to get utility underpinning and support of the project. But we're kind of focused on the first three steps, first things first.
How much UF6 processing actually occurs in the United States right now?
So the total demand in the U.S. is 18,000 metric tons. The U.S. produces about 7,000 to 8,000 tons from the single facility in Metropolis, Illinois. It's been around since the 1950s. It's been a workhorse. We're looking to be complementary to that, not in competition with it. I think we need both these facilities are desperately needed in the United States, but we're only producing not even half of what we're consuming today. So our 10,000 tons would certainly help that. But this is a global facility. It can receive concentrates from mines across North America and even from around the world. And the UF6 product can also be, obviously the ideal customers are enrichment plants in the United States, but it can also go to European enrichment sites too, if that was the case. But we're really looking to be part of the domestic fuel cycle here.
And currently, the deficit, where does it come from? Is that a Russian thing?
Well, there's capacity in France with Orano and Cameco's facility in Blind River and Port Hope, Ontario. And the Russians were a very significant supplier of about 25% of our conversion enrichment needs. That, of course, comes to an end in 2027 with the ban coming into effect. And so, we definitely see, today about a 5,000 ton gap with the Russians out of the market today. But we're building a plant that is not just for today's deficit, but also, with this doubling, tripling, quadrupling of nuclear power, we want to be, I have a feeling when the plant comes online at 10,000 tons in 2029, 2030, people will be saying, why didn't you make it bigger? So we are looking in the design phase to ensure that it could also be scalable in the coming years, if that should be the case.
Yeah, no doubt. So we're going to get you to switch hats now.
Yep.
Because you've been wearing your UEC hat.
Mm-hmm.
We'll flip that one off. You're also the president of the Uranium Producers of America.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about the bigger, broader picture. You mentioned there was like MP in materials, which the federal government has put an equity investment into processing.
Mm-hmm.
They've also just recently, taken an equity position in Lithium America's Thatcher Path's lithium project.
Mm-hmm.
Are we seeing a point in time where they're going to be looking to take equity positions in the uranium industry, and are you guys a candidate?
Yeah, I mean, UEC clearly, has their hand up for such a deal. We think it would be a good investment for the U.S. government, and more importantly, the taxpayer. There's no such thing as government money; it's taxpayers' money, and we think this is positive policy if the government can come in and take a stake on a company that ultimately will be very successful and generate a return on that investment. But those are kind of company-specific opportunities. With the Uranium Producers of America, our main focus is really in three areas. One, get uranium back on the critical minerals list. President Trump already considers it a critical mineral, so it's more just codifying that at the USGS, and if that takes legislation, we're pushing to have that happen. Why is that important? Because it unlocks, fast track permitting. If the mineral is critical for the nation's security and energy and economic security, it gets advantageous path to development. Very important to us. We're also really pushing on the strategic uranium reserve idea. It was something President Trump instituted in his first term. And in recent comments, the Energy Secretary Chris Wright in Vienna indicated that he also thinks that's a good way to build up our stockpile of U.S. origin uranium conversion enrichment, whether it's for defense needs or energy security. That's good policy. It's taxpayer dollars, but it's transferring taxpayer dollars from cash to inventory of valuable U.S. origin uranium. So the balance sheet remains the same. And so the fourth, I think the third area that we're focused on is, the success we saw with the Russian ban coming into effect, even with the waiver process through 2027. It's very important that come into effect, that we're not competing against Russian dumped uranium in the coming years. But we're also lobbying to extend that to Chinese uranium, because we're seeing circumvention of trade law with Russian uranium through China and into the United States, something that nobody thinks is a good idea. So those are kind of the three big issues. We've got the Defense Production Act consortium meetings in Washington in 2 weeks. That will be interesting to see if there's anything there that could be a boost for the uranium industry. And also the Section 232 investigation has been underway, and recommendations should come out shortly that would provide some remedies to counter this high level of foreign imports and its impact on national and energy security. So a lot of balls in the air. They're all seem to be trending the right way. So we're very encouraged.
As long as they don't come down at the same time, you should be okay.
Exactly.
When we've talked about things up until this point, we've always been using the term energy transition.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when we were in discussion about how fast the AI stuff came on board from our discussion last March to our discussion last November, I don't hear the term energy transition any longer. It's energy addition. I've had an interesting conversation here with a coal miner from Virginia who's saying that, they're not closing the power plants, so we still are putting out the coal, even though we're supposed to have stopped doing that. But we don't know if we're supposed to be continuing to do that in the future. But we've actually probably entered that stage where, these coal-fired and gas-fired power plants are still going to be around. And we need this nuclear energy to increase the power on the grid rather than replace power.
Oh, yeah. No, it's, and you put it very well. It is energy addition, not transition. What's great about nuclear is, and it's not nuclear or coal or gas, it's gas, nuclear, and coal. We need them all. And what I like about nuclear is if you come from the left side of the political spectrum and you care about carbon emissions, nuclear power is carbon free. And it is also base load and is also abundant, which appeals to the political right. So we have the advantage of Republicans and Democrats agreeing on something, and it's nuclear power. That's one of the few things we all agree on. But that's important because in this need for abundant, resilient, reliable energy, we can provide that with 24/7 nuclear power, but it's also clean energy, which also ticks some boxes, not everybody's, but it's a selling point that we don't want to forget. But if we don't build out baseload generating capacity of electricity in the United States in a very big way, President Trump calls it an energy emergency, and he's accurate to call it that. We're going to have regional blackouts. I think we've come very close in various regions in summer and winter peaks recently in the United States, because it's been very tempting for utility companies to cut into their reserve margins to sign these contracts with these data centers and these big offtake customers. But we got to build more. We got to preserve that reserve margin and grow the capacity. And that's really the story. We won't win the battle on AI versus the Chinese if we don't build that out. And again, it's just a matter of we need it for energy security right now.
And how fast do we actually need to be building that out? Because that we talk about this energy emergency, but most people don't see past the end of their nose. So until they have a brownout because there's not enough electricity, it's just it's a politician, exaggerating.
That will get people's attention if there are brownouts or blackouts. You've seen it in Spain, you've seen it in Australia, where they went too far down the renewables and they just have created an unreliable grid when you do that. And so, I've seen figures out of Commonwealth of Virginia where today data centers consume about 20% of the total electricity generated in the state. That's going to 40% in 2 years. And the governor there, Governor Youngkin, says, even without the data centers, just the electrification of homes and businesses, vehicles, electric EVs, there is load growth in these regions. And you might say, well, isn't it easier just to build a gas-fired plant? Well, it may be easier, but get in line. If you want a gas turbine from GE Vernova and you place an order today, you might get it by 2034. And the same is true with SMRs. We're seeing the first small modular reactors being built, and we see a lot of consumers saying, oh, I'm really anxious to see how the first ones are built. I'm going to jump in and I'll be second, third, or fourth. Well, get in line for that. If and when these are successful, there'll be thousands of these ordered of New Scale, X Energy, GE, Hitachi, Rolls-Royce. So again, we're in a race to kind of build up our generating capacity in a way that we really haven't seen in the United States since the early 2000s, maybe over 20 years ago.
Well, that leads to the obvious question, the elephant in the room. Mm-hmm. Can it be built fast enough?
Well, it has to. And I think that's where the Trump administration is saying large reactors will be licensed and permitted in 18 months or less. Small reactors under 6 months. We're not going through these 6 or 7 year licensing and permitting fiascos. We need the energy. And it doesn't mean we're going to compromise safety. That's everything in our industry. But if you are in an energy emergency, you don't let NEPA or long drawn out EISs just paralyze growth in the economy, and this is a particularly important part of the economy, electricity.
Now, is this another opportunity for the Trump administration to put equity up, just like they've done with Thacker Pass and MP Materials? Is this where they do it? And then are they capable of putting a floor on the price by using their equity in the energy companies to set a floor price for the uranium that's needed for the reactors?
Yeah, there's and this is a topic of great discussion, is how best for the U.S. government to financially incentivize new nuclear power plants. The early SMRs were cost-sharing grants through ARPA, Advanced Reactor Development Program. That's one way. Another way is attract private equity by de-risking the investment. We have 14 of the world's largest banks have now said that they support the tripling of nuclear power by 2050. If they can now invest with confidence that their billions of dollars are going to projects that aren't going to be tied up for decades in licensing and permitting chaos, capital will flow from private equity, from public capital markets, and debt equity. And I think you're beginning to see that now. So it can't all fall on the taxpayer. I think in European jurisdictions, I think in Sweden, the UK, that tends to be the model where it's more direct subsidies to get those nuclear plants built. I think some of that is okay, but it can't all fall on the taxpayer, which is why I like the Trump administration's idea of de-risking the investments for private and public capital markets to fund.
Yeah, it's changed. Like when I was a kid, all utilities were government owned.
Yeah.
At least in Canada they were. And just because of the high cost of the infrastructure. So government was the only thing that had the capital capacity. And I almost see us going back to a quasi system of that because we need it and we need it quicker than the capital markets could provide it.
Well, I mean, rate regulated utilities have been very successful, like Duke Energy, Dominion, where they're offered a decent rate of return in exchange if they build these plants and generate the electricity and distribute it to the grid, to the public, they'll receive that guaranteed rate of return. So that works. It works very well, frankly. And I think there won't be one size fits all, but there is a desire to see more plants built faster, more than I've ever seen in my career.
Yeah, well, it reminds me of that 1980s song, "The Future is So Bright I Gotta Wear Shades,"
Absolutely.
and they were a nuclear scientist in that song. So if people want to continue to follow this this story as it progresses, how do they follow UEC? How do they follow the American uranium producers?
Yeah, uraniumenergy.com is the UEC website. And in there is all the information you'd want on the company. UPA, our website isn't as up to date, I would say, as UEC's. But you know, just pick up the papers these days, and nuclear is on the front page just about every other day. We have incredibly positive news coming out. So again, exciting times, great opportunity. It's time for the industry to step up and execute.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for taking the time. It's always good to see you. And I think we might try and do another one of these in New Orleans in about a month's time. And the rate that things are going, I'm sure we're going to find new stuff to talk about for then too.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike.
Like you. The Prospector News podcast is for educational purposes only. The opinions expressed are those of the participants and are not to be taken as investment advice. Listeners need to do their own due diligence and seek advice of a licensed investment advisor.